Welcome to Progressive Short Takes. I'm Joe Firestone, your host. In this short take, I want to tell you that President Trump is responsible for all those COVID-19 deaths. I say this in the context of Joe Scarborough's condemnation this morning, on NBC of the president, and his condemnation of the editorial by the Wall Street Journal, suggesting that since we knew so little about COVID at that time, and so little about what to do about it, that really Donald Trump cannot be fairly said to be responsible for most of those deaths. I'm afraid that I hold the opposite view. The Woodward Tapes do establish that as of February 7th, that Donald Trump knew that the COVID-19 virus was much more serious than the flu. In his own words, 5 times as severe a threat as the flu. On later dates, he admitted to downplaying the severity of the virus in order to avoid a panic on the part of the American people. He was vague about what kind of panic he was talking about. I'm not going to speculate about that. I've speculated about it in other places. It isn't clear from the specific statements what kind of panic he was talking about. We only know that he lied to the American public about what he knew to be the severity of the virus. We also know he's been lying since then about the severity of the virus. We also know that he knew on February 7th that the virus was transmitted through the air. So it's reasonable to infer that he must have known that face masks would have helped in containing the virus. So he lied about the severity of the virus, and he was dishonest for months and months and months concerning the likely efficacy of face masks in helping us to contain the virus. We also know that Donald Trump put forward and failed to implement any national plan, any comprehensive plan, any collaborative plan across the country in order to handle the virus and contain the deaths. He failed to provide any leadership from the Oval Office about what we could do to contain the virus, and the leadership that he did provide was leadership of the wrong kind, resulting in people refusing to mask, refusing to social distance, and refusing to take any kind of vigorous action to contain the virus. As of today, in consequence, we are sitting with 197,000 deaths. And this is according to the Worldometer site. And 595 deaths per million. The Institute for Health Evaluation Metrics of the University, of Washington is currently predicting that we will have 400K deaths by the end of the year from the coronavirus. If they are right, we will, by that time, have 1,200 deaths per million, which is a higher figure than any nation in the world has right now. If we get there, we may be close to number one in the world. Certainly, we will have much higher death rates than any of the European countries. The only ones that will approach us will probably be Latin American countries. Currently, there's COVID slaughter going on in Latin America as we speak. But the most important reason why I believe that the responsibility is justly laid at Donald Trump's feet is because of the performance, of other countries to bring home what a difference performance makes. All we have to do is look at a relatively small number, of other nations in order to get a clear notion of what could have been done if Donald Trump had handled things in the right way in the United States. Let's start with Australia. The death rate in Australia right now from COVID-19 is 31 deaths per million. If we project that up to the population of the United States, we would have 10,261 deaths today rather than 197,000 deaths. In other words, if we had managed as well as Australia, we would have saved 187,000 people. Japan has a death rate of 11 deaths per million. If we had managed as well as the Japanese, we would have lost by today only 3,641 people. That means we would have saved 194,000 deaths as of today. Let's move on to South Korea. They have 7 deaths per million. If we had managed as well as they, we would have had only 2,317 deaths by today. That is 195,000 deaths that we would have saved. If we had managed as well as New Zealand, we would have had only 5 deaths per million. That computes out to 1,655 deaths by today, meaning we would have saved 196,000 deaths. Moving on to Thailand. If we had managed as well as Thailand, we would have had 0.8 of a fatality per million, which works out to 265 fatalities for the whole United States, or 197,000 fatalities saved. Finally, if we look at Taiwan, that has a Medicare for all system in place, modeled on the Medicare system for the United States, but extended to their whole population, we would have had fatalities of only 0.3 of a person per million, 99 fatalities for the whole United States, and 197,000 fatalities saved up until now, compared to our true performance. Now, how can we conclude that our leadership, that the chief executive of the United States and his administration is not responsible for anywhere from 187,000 to 197,000 excessive deaths that we have had. We have cases, of other nations, like our own, but culturally, like our own in relation to modernization, with better healthcare systems. It's true, but Donald Trump could have led us immediately, for the duration of the crisis, into a better healthcare system than we have now. That is part of what he could have done. He did not. He did not match the executive skills and the leadership by the executive of the other nations that I have mentioned here. And it has cost us between 187,000 and 197,000 deaths as of today. As little as 99 Americans could have died from COVID-19. If your relative, if a member of your family or a close friend of yours or a grandparent has died from COVID, it is highly likely that such deaths were a result of the failed leadership of this administration and Donald Trump. Now, I'm not here to say that a different administration would have done things any better. We cannot know that for sure, though there is some evidence such that we can suppose that a Democratic administration that called on Ron Klain to manage the COVID crisis in a similar way to the way he managed the Ebola crisis, that perhaps such an administration would have been more successful. That's at least a reasonable presumption. But we don't have to presume that. We don't have to presume any other different kind of performance. We don't have to speculate. We need to hold our executives, our elected officials, we need to hold them accountable based on what they do, compared to other executives who were facing a similar situation around the world. We have that evidence, and that evidence shows that Donald Trump and his administration have been a miserable failure. One of the greatest failures in American history by any executive. Such an administration, such a leader, such a person must be held accountable at the polls, must be voted out of office, should long since, by the way, have been impeached for poor performance in this area and for many, many other reasons. I mean, that's it. I don't see how people could avoid the conclusion that he is not largely responsible for this. What the Wall Street Journal wrote was sophistry. What the National Review is writing is sophistry. It's nonsense. It ignores performance in the rest of the world. It ignores bona fide comparisons. It ignores fairness. It is craven defense of someone they want in office because they're profiting from his being in office. Okay, that's the end of this short tape. I'll see you soon with another progressive short take.